it's all about prioritization, right? And it's not that you have to prioritize this or something else, but that looking from a detached perspective and just recognizing where your priorities are. So if for that day looking for iPhone cases for an hour is more of a priority than sitting on a meditation cushion, and just being honest about that. Again, it's not that we're, vilifying that behavior or making it seem like you did the wrong thing that day. Man, that was the wrong choice. It's not like that. It's just being honest with your experience in that moment, and then recognizing also why you're doing it. Is it really because there were so many iPhone cases that to make the best decision and get the best case, it really took an hour? Or is the actual act of spending an hour flipping through iPhone cases online actually a distraction from something that you don't want to be doing or want to be feeling? So it's constantly getting back to noticing what we're doing. And even if you continue doing it, just being curious of what's going on in your experience, which is driving that behavior. And whether it's walking the dog, why am I walking the dog right now? Why am I, making dinner right now? Why am I looking for iPhone cases? Why am I getting on the meditation mat? Coming to, and again, it's not a story-based thing. It's not like we're looking to like, okay, well, I'm doing it now because blah, 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 blah. Just come down to the experience and watch what's happening and see if you are actually choosing to do that behavior, which is one of the most important things that we can notice, because it feels like you're making that choice to sit and look at iPhones for an hour. But are you? Really come into your experience and recognize where the choice point is being made. At what point are you going, I could be looking at an iPhone, I could be going and getting on the mat, and then feel, what is it that feels like it could actually make a choice? What is it that feels like, okay, I made the choice to sit here and continue looking at iPhone cases? That is a super, super important thing to recognize, because the spoiler is that we're never making choices. We can't make choices. It only feels like we're making choices, but just hearing it or reading it in a book doesn't actually help us. You have to come back to it in experience and see it for yourself over and over and over again until it just clicks that, oh, right, there really isn't anybody there making that choice. There really isn't. No matter how much I think I can make this choice, it is a physical impossibility. It's just not happening. And so that is why we do the inquiry. And that, when I talked about the room of an abyss that you walk by without going into, it's because what is there when you do the inquiry can be very destabilizing. All of a sudden, everything that you take yourself to be, everything that you have taken as the world, everything that you have prioritized as, this is the way I should be in the world, these are the things that are important in life, all of that can change, because now all of a sudden you're seeing things completely differently. What you took to be the case for who you are, what you can do in the world, what the priorities are, what really matters, all of that can completely have the rug pulled out from under it. And that can be very scary. And so that's why that room is just this unknown. It's this black, questionable unknown that we don't know what's going to happen when we see through that. And that's why we walk past the room, kind of like pretending it's not really there, rather than just opening the door and going in and seeing what that experience is like. And so that's why it takes a little bit of courage, and it takes a little bit of well, a lot of conviction, actually. Like, that's why like, as that she's excited to go to the meetings and to do all that, because there's a conviction there that it's okay to open that door and to sit in that room. And it's really a curiosity about what it's going to be, as opposed to a fear of what's going to happen if I go in there. And so that's why I say, be on the alert for underlying fear that might be getting in there, keeping you from getting on the mat or doing the other thing, because it's great to read books. I'm definitely not anti-literacy. I love reading. That's all great. I love hearing other people talk about these things, hearing other perspectives on it. That's all great. But notice again, when you go out and you buy a new book or you pick up a book to read it, feel into that moment. What is your motivation for doing that right now? Is it because there's a genuine curiosity that, yeah, I'm just really excited to hear what this person experienced and to see how they express it? Or is it, I'm going to get something out of that because this is going to be the book that does it. This is the book that is going to tell me that thing. And then the light bulb goes off, I'm enlightened and all is done. Or is it that I'm reading this book because it makes me feel like I'm doing something on the spiritual path without actually having to go by that scary room? It's like the room is there. I know it's there. If I read about it over here, it keeps me kind of like in the general house, kind of in the hallway where the room is, but I don't actually have to go into the room because it's still all up in the mind. It's still staying active only in terms of conceptualization. You get to read about it, you get to weigh it against your other beliefs, you get to add more beliefs onto your bookshelf of beliefs, you get to have little glimpses and little tastes and little, oh yeah, that that does sound familiar, that triggers something, and that's all wonderful. But ultimately, it all comes down to the shifts happen from just actual looking, actual inquiry, and just actual experience. And all of the other reading and all of the other stuff, especially if you start taking it as beliefs, especially if you start comparing, this person with this person, and well, I don't know, this person describes it this way, this person describes it that way, then it starts being this whole head trip where you just create this whole whirlwind of doubt, because now you don't know who to believe, because they're saying somewhat different things, because they're experiencing it somewhat differently. So now you don't know who to believe, you don't know what to take, and then it keeps you even further away, because now I don't do anything, because now I have no idea what's right. I don't know what the right path is. I don't know what the right exercises are that I should be doing. I might as well just go walk the dog again and just do something else. So those are the things that I do want you to be aware of when you are actually going through your day and making supposed choices about how you're spending your time, about collecting more and more spiritual material and engaging that way. Because for every hour that you spend reading a book on spirituality, you could just as well spend that on the mat meditating or doing inquiry. So what is it in that moment that makes reading that book the more palatable option than getting on the mat and doing some inquiry or watching your breath? That's all.
No, that's good input. And I'll definitely, I mean,
And even, just saying about walking meditation around the block while walking the dog, there's something very, very interesting and very, very revealing when you try to do that, because you do notice that, as I said, you're walking and you can focus on something for a second, and then boop, something else takes you away, and mind is here and there. But that's super interesting, because for one thing, it shows us that our attention is not under our control. If you're walking and you say you want to focus on just, your feet walking on the street, you're just trying to, or even we'll say you're keeping your eye on a telephone pole that's up in front of you, if you have telephone poles that are above ground.
yeah.
You have a telephone pole and you're walking towards it, and you just want to keep your attention on that telephone pole, and the next thing you know, you're looking over at this truck, you're looking over at this at a bush, at a bird that flies by, you're hearing a sound and your attention is there. Well, notice you were choosing to put your attention on that telephone pole. What happened? Is it that you then chose to look at the truck and the bush and the bird and hear the sound? Or is this something that's completely involuntary, completely out of your control? It's just happening. And so there's a meditation in just recognizing this constant shifting of awareness that is not under your control. And there's an insight that can be had there in that, right, nothing that is happening is under my control. It feels like I'm
Which I
choosing.
believe that, but I mean,
But it's not a belief. That's the thing. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm asking you to experience it over and over again until it just becomes lived experience. And it's not a belief. It's just that's just the way it is.
well, let's say that's just the way it is. And I mean, like I'm just saying, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But so what? It doesn't change anything for me throughout the day. I mean, that's the way it is. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the words are going to be coming out of my mouth next. I don't know anything, but and that's the way it is.
But you operate from the belief that I am making decisions. These decisions are incredibly important, which is why in my life, in my business, in my family, everything else, the things that I choose are incredibly important. The time that I decide to allocate to this thing versus that thing makes a difference. That I am choosing it for this reason. I am doing it for this reason. That's your underlying belief that's directing everything. So if there was really an internalized understanding that there isn't anything there, choosing, there can't be a chooser, there can't be anything being chosen. The attachment and the drive to the importance that is put on all of these choices is greatly reduced, if not completely gone, because now you recognize that there's no imperative on these certain things, because there is no choice involved with it. It is happening completely outside of your control. But the even more important thing in terms of what we're talking about here is that it's chipping away yet again on the illusion of you being a self who can control, because it's about being a controller, not just about, well, there's somebody here who feels like he can control, but he can't control. We're undercutting all of that and going right to the root of there is nobody there who can control. Hence, there is nothing that can be controlled. We're coming down one layer. And so having the insight that I'm not controlling anything puts into question, if I'm here and I can't control anything, what does it mean to be a self? What does it mean to be here? And then it puts that further into question, so you can go deeper into, again, what is it that feels like it's an experiencer here? What feels like a self? What feels like a controller? What feels like it's making decisions? And then each of those get inquired into deeply enough that they're seen through and seen to be mirages. And when they're seen to be just a mirage, they're no longer believed in. So it's like, if you were in the desert and you see, shimmering on the above the sand and you think water, well, it's not really an oasis. There's not really water there, but most of the time we believe it. We have these experiences that feel like something is happening. We have thoughts that say, I'm choosing that, I'm doing that. All of those things are believed. So we think that that's a self as much as that shimmering in the ocean, or shimmering in the desert is an oasis of water. When we get to realize that, oh, no, it's just heat lines above the sands and it's just an optical illusion, that whole thing breaks down. And now we no longer believe that that is an oasis. We don't run towards it. It doesn't direct our behavior. We're not like, I'm going to run in that direction over and over and over again, thinking that it's real. We can just say, no, it's just an optical illusion, and then just go about, the other direction. And that's essentially what's happening with this. We're seeing through all of these layers of illusion, that we can choose, that we can decide that there's anybody there who could do any of these things. So that's really at the crux of it. So it's not just that, you're still going to go about your life as normal, just knowing this one other thing. That's when it's just a belief on the bookshelf. And it's like, yeah, okay, I know there's no self. I know that there's no choosing. I know all of that. Fine. But I'm still going to go about my life as normal. No, if you really know those things internally, your actual experience of life and your behavior in life does change to a degree. You don't just sit in a cave and meditate for the rest of your life, but there is a freedom with action where they simply happen, and there's no hangups on, I have to do this the right way, I have to do this, now I have to do this for this reason. All of those things fall away and your experience of life changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. just keeping an eye out for what is even at the root. What is our root uh like prime directive? I think they use the term in, like, for robots and sci-fi and that sort of thing. Like, what is our underlying basic viewpoint about the world and ourselves in the world? And then once we realize all the reasons that once we feel what it is, we can start to recognize that all of these supposed choices that we're making, all of these supposed decisions that we're making, are all coming out of this one place, this one feeling of either insecurity, unworthiness, guilt, something like that, that is absolutely creating the webs of every decision and choice that is being made. But it's not being made by us. It's being made out of this prime belief that has just been existing and unexamined for decades. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, really good for you to start to be aware of what those things are that are driving everything that is being experienced throughout the day. Because that's what it is. They're these underlying forces that are just making everything happen. And then there's this other layer of thought that comes on and takes credit for it, and it justifies it, and it explains away, it happened because of this, it happens because I am this kind of person, it happens because I want this. And it's all illusion. They're just all thoughts that are taking credit for something that had no person as a foundation making any of that happen.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's why being aware of thoughts is so important. Being aware of what's really going on in the mind. And just going back really briefly to when I was saying about walking and trying to do, walking meditation while walking the dog or something outside, not just recognizing, I kind of got off on the tangent of choosing, but you're recognizing that your awareness is diverting against your wishes, right? If you want to stay focused on one telephone pole and your attention is darting all over the place, that shows that you are not the one in control of your attention or your focus. But also notice if it's because you're walking, you see a bird, and then all of a sudden you start this whole mental thing about, oh, I haven't seen that bird in blah, 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 and I remember the last time that was, or that reminds me of a TV show I watched, or blah, blah, blah. And then notice how quickly you're brought back into the mind. And then as soon as you recognize that that's happened, come back to the lamppost and just recognize, wow, that was a really fast diversion. Did you choose to go and have all of these thoughts? Did you choose to start thinking about the television show or the past memory or anything else? You're recognizing in that what happened. And did you actually choose it? Did you want that to happen? Did you make it happen? Where in you is that? And then just keep coming back to that. So you can even, just because we are out saying that we're going to do a meditation doesn't in any way mean that the mind has to be free of thoughts or that you have to be, mentally quiet or focused on one thing. Those are different styles of meditation. But you can get so much out of meditating by walking around the block and just recognizing the diversions of the mind, how fast it goes, and just keep coming back to that object and just recognizing what that really means, that you cannot choose where the mind goes. You cannot choose what you're thinking about. You cannot choose where your attention is, and just let that sink in over and over and over again. We've talked, in recent meetings with especially about the power of having these great, meditational insights where you meditate, you have these wonderful states where you experience, impermanence or, flashes of no self or something like that, or complete cessation. But then you come back to life. And if you don't integrate that into your daily life and take that as an insight that then means something in terms of how you are interacting with the world afterwards, without that getting really into the body, so to speak, and completely integrated, it's just a psychedelic experience. It's just like, dropped acid, it was really cool, and then went back to my life. it can be just that frivolous if you don't actually integrate it. And so you can do the same thing just walking around the block and recognizing how divergent the mind is, how completely out of control it is, and then letting that insight permeate its way into your experience and recognize that there is never a point when I have control over it. Who do I think I am that has control over it? What feels like it has control over it? And then let that fuel the inquiry that follows
So
next.
let's say you're walking around and you recognize it, I mean, that this is very, I mean, that's exactly what happens to me on my walks. I'm like, I'm going to concentrate on my feet.
Yeah.
10 seconds later, oh, my landscaping, this, whatever. But let's say you recognize it. You say, I don't have control. This is just happening. And then I'm assuming the next step would be to go back to your concentrate. And are you just saying, just repeat it over and over?
Yep.
Because it doesn't take long to recognize it, right?
No.
I mean, that's just a split second. And then, I guess I mean, basic meditation, you always need to go back to your concentration, right?
You
And then
do, but the difference is we're letting, when you have that insight, we're letting the ramification really settle in. So it's not thinking about it so much. It's not that you're creating another story about it and making a belief out of it. But if you recognize it, there should be, or there likely will be, this kind of moment of like a profound oh, or just like a brief moment of stillness, a brief moment of a recognition where the the illusion has broken away for a moment. It's like when you see an optical illusion and then you see like how it was constructed, and you have that moment of like, oh, like there's like a little bit of a, that's not what I expected, and then something kind of shifts a little bit. It's that kind of feeling where it's like, oh, there's like this little gap, and then of course you can go back to the telephone pole and keep your concentration thing and do it over and over again. But it's the
which that's
recognition.
what I'm not sure if I'm experiencing. And even, I actually think I see snakes a lot because I'm afraid of snakes, and there's
Uh-huh.
snakes by neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
And so that's a common experience for me. Like every couple of days I'll see these sticks. But pretty quickly I'm like, okay, that's not a snake. I thought it was a snake. And it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't know that if I've experienced anything more than like, okay, yeah, I didn't choose this. And then just it's like right back to, normal stuff.
Feel in it's like a turning in slightly, where you go from, can you, oh god, it's so hard to describe. It's like, can you feel the recognition of the recognizing that there's no chooser without actually having to say the words?
I don't think I've tried that before. I think there's usually words, and there's thoughts, which I would say are words, as a eh, well, and this is all happening pretty quick, right? Within a second or two, as far as the recognition and the feeling you're describing.
Yeah, yeah, but it can be like, if right now, if we take the experiment, which I think we've done before with the palm turning, right? And it's just a
Mhm.
good, easy one to use. So if you hold your hands out in front of you, keep your eyes on your hands, and at some point, turn one of your hands over. But watch in your experience for anything that feels like you're making a decision when and which hand it's going to be. And then do it again, and keep really focused on what in your experience seems to be making a choice? What does it feel like to feel like you can make a choice?
Well, and I also feel like there's this background commentary going on just because I've done this before, and it's like,
What's the background commentary saying?
it's saying like, I know what's gonna happen, you
Ah,
know.
but you don't, because you're in an experience now.
Yeah. Not that I know what's gonna happen with my hands.
Yeah,
I know what the point of this is.
I know, but that's the thing is,
Yeah.
again, we're not relating to things from learned knowledge, which is why
Yeah.
it's actually a benefit in some ways to not having any of the knowledge, because now we're referring to life as it really is in its actual experience without all of the preconceived notions. So without knowing the outcome, what is it that actually seems like it can or is making a choice?
Yeah, I would say that there's just this voice that's coming in and having all this commentary around it, And my particular voice is willing to say, I don't control this, but it's going, you know.
So the thoughts are just thoughts that come in afterwards. So
Yeah.
during the actual so they come after the actual choice or the action happened. So the question is, during the moment before the incident happened, before in this case the hand flipped, could you tell which hand was going to flip and when? And did you have any feeling of being the one who was making that choice or making it happen?
No.
No. So can you feel into how that feels, that you didn't choose it and yet it happened anyway?
That's where I'm that's where I have I can't really feel into it.
How what do you how do you feel about the suggestion that you could not choose anything and you did not choose anything? What does that bring up?
Just that's the way it is.
So if it's that commonplace and that average of an insight, then do you still feel like you can make a decision to go read a book instead of getting on the mat, or what you're going to make for dinner, or what you're going to have for lunch, or what you're going to say to your wife later on tonight?
Yeah, I guess maybe there is a contradiction because I guess I still believe if you said turn your hand over now, then it feels like I'm following the instructions, even though I guess now is subjective. Like how fast would it happen, right?
Well, yeah. And so on a similar thing, right? Here's another fun one that I really love is right now, name three movies, the first three movies that come to mind.
Top Gun, Top Gun 2, and Back to the Future.
All right, great. So did you, before those movies came out of your mouth, did you is there a reason that you, well, if I ask you if there's a reason why you chose those movies, you're going to now fabricate a reason why you picked each of those movies. The mind is going to do that automatically. But could you tell before they came out of your mouth which movies that you were going to pick?
No, definitely not. Especially the first one. I think the second one, I was like, I thought it'd be funny to say Top Gun 2 after Top Gun. Um, If there was a Top Gun 3, I would have said Top Gun 3, but oh yeah.
But the first one was a real surprise, wasn't it? It's like,
Yeah, it just was like, it's funny. I'm sitting in front of a TV stand with a bunch of old DVDs, which I
yeah,
didn't like look or
yeah,
anything. I just said,
yep,
it's funny. I just saw something that said High School Musical.
uh-huh. But that didn't come out. So for
No,
some reason, Top Gun was the first one that came out. But
yeah.
in that moment, there was a spontaneous arising, and that spontaneous arising is no different from any other word that comes out of your mouth. It's no different from any other interaction that you have with anybody else. Any thought that you have about, I am going to pre-rehearse this speech, I am going to, you know, we're going to discuss blah, 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 blah later. All the details of that are going to be completely spontaneous, and they're going to emerge without anybody choosing every one of those words. We couldn't talk if we had to consciously think about every single word before we said it. It just doesn't function that way.
No, would you say it was? What's your thoughts on the thought of this? Is that the thinking mind or the egoic mind can never really believe that it will always come in and think that it has a purpose. That it's there.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about are primarily self-referential thoughts.
Yeah.
And thoughts can be there, but they don't have to be believed. They don't have to be taken literally. And even if they keep coming up, they're just thoughts. They're just mind noise. They're just like, somebody's talking in the other room or outside the house or a television or anything else. It's no more consequential than that. But it's the real recognition of that being the case that makes all the difference.
Well, how much do you think, like, just, I mean, in the rest of my life, practical life,
Mhm.
you know, there's an right
Yeah.
that's interacting in the world. So, how much do you think interacting in the world in the ways that, you know, that like how one would go about their life? And for me, like most of the time, just feeling like with a character and things to do. I mean, that seems like an impediment.
Okay. So here's the thing, right? We're not getting rid of an we're not getting rid of a self. There isn't one there, and there never was one. It's all been an illusion. The only thing that changes is a recognition that that has always been the case. And then there's an internal sense of relaxation, freedom, and less suffering because these self-referential thoughts are not believed to be true. This mirage is seen through. You're not constantly going towards this oasis that doesn't exist. You recognize that it doesn't exist and you're just driving yourself deeper and deeper into a desert where you're going to die. This is the exact opposite of that. This is just recognizing, and again, it's not you recognizing, it's a spontaneous thing that happens, that there is nobody there. There's still going to be a meat suit called who has a family and a job and goes about their life. And on that one level, all of that seems rather unchanged. You're still going to be there. You're still going to be able to perform all of your normal functions. You're still going to be able to do all these things. But internally, there's a sense of openness. There's a sense of freedom in that because what the thoughts that have been there that have been ruminating about really being worried about the future, really being worried about the present, really being stressed and emotional about the past and all the things that you've done wrong and could have done better and all the things that could go wrong in the future and all of that drops away because none of it is real. Every bit of that has just been mind noise. The past is no longer here. There is no point in condemning ourselves, ruminating about it, or any of that. The future is completely unknowable. The only thing that exists is now. It's this constant, ever present now, which we cannot feel any other time around. And even if we postulate, okay, well, there's still something that we're going to call a future, it is 100% unknowable. And as many things as we can do to try to safeguard that future for ourselves and our loved ones. And I'm not saying that you should just go squander all your money and say, screw it, life will figure itself out in the future. There is a way of relating to even that with a sense of relaxed detachment, because there is not an internal narrative self who is going along this timeline from past to future, who can make a decision that is going to be super consequential and is going to end one direct way. You can't, even if you make the best decision with the information that you have now, and we're going to pretend right now like you can actually make decisions and choices, but even if that was the case, if you could make decisions and choices on all of the information you have, you've done so much research on which stock to buy, and this is going to be the one, and it's going to safeguard us for the future. You have no idea what information you don't know that you have not pulled into that equation, and you have no idea if in the future we're going to have a complete stock market crash where everything is devalued. We could have a solar flare that wipes out all electricity on the planet, and all of that is meaningless. We could have a nuclear apocalypse. We could get hit by an asteroid. We could have any number of things that happen that make all of that planning that you did completely inconsequential. And there's no way to know that from where you stand. So if you stress yourself out that I have to have every single bit of information so that I can make the best choice for the future, and then I am safeguarded, that's just not going to happen. There's a level of delusion in that. So you can still do your due diligence, save money, invest, do the things, but with a sense of detachment to it, where you are not completely constricted to the outcome. And if it goes wrong, it's not, oh man, I should have done that. I shouldn't have, I should have known better. I should have done that other thing. We do that, and then we just create suffering upon suffering upon suffering for ourselves, all out of this illusion that we could have done something different, but you couldn't. The choice was made based off of all the information that was given, but we can never, ever, ever have all of the information. We cannot know absolutely everything in time and space that is happening, which is what you would need to be able to make some sort of choice that would be relevant to the future. We can't do it. It's not in our capacity. And so you can let go of some of that, because there's just so much held into this fact that we feel like we are controlling everything for ourselves, for our families, for whatever reach, grandiose reach we give ourselves, and we can't. And so all of that is the sort of thing that falls away, at least to some degree, with each kind of insight into lack of doership, lack of control, lack of a future, lack of being able to know anything. All of that just drops these kind of weight after weight after weight that we carry with us. And
So,
that's it.
so I mean, I guess the more you can just ask yourself that question, am I doing this, or how does it feel? Why does it feel like I'm doing this, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And just noticing my attention was taken from this to this, or okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And just let all of that recognition settle in, give it a minute to just really, instead of blasting right into the next thing. Sometimes, when we have a bit of a recognition, we have a little insight into something, just let it be, just let it kind of settle. The body kind of integrates it, the mind kind of integrates it, that it's like, okay, this is new information. Let's just let that kind of settle in and find a home before we continue on to the next thing. Otherwise, we can really just, skip right over some really deep insights if we just gave them a chance to integrate.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's something I'm going to try to do. I think that's an issue for me, is it's just, oh, and then it's like, but I got to do this.
Yep. Check mark. I saw it, done. Let's go on to the next thing now. And yeah. And so it's like, those are our two things, like not really valuing our insights when we have them and giving them a chance to settle in, or overvaluing the situation in which they happen. Like people who have these deep meditation experiences, that have these things, and then it becomes, I have to be back in that state all the time for that insight to be relevant, and that's also not the case. Again, we can just integrate and let that realization settle in so that it becomes infused in our life and starts directing the way that we interrelate with the world. We don't want any of these things to be isolated, rarefied experiences where you have to sit and meditate for 4 hours in order to feel this thing, and then that's the only time that you feel that thing. That's not helpful. It's taking that thing that you feel after meditating for 4 hours and then letting that change the way that your whole experience in the world is altered. Yeah, so it's all about integration. It's all about integration.